There are certain skills every beginner piano player should be practicing, but they're not. One such technique is chord mastery. I like to learn my chords based on common characteristics. So I first learned the white key major chords, which is C major, F major, and G major. They're really easy to play. You just play the bottom note, evenly space out a chord, and you got your majors. But it only works for those three, C, F, and G. Next, I learned the ones with a sharp in the middle. D, E, A, or Drug Enforcement Administration is how I remember it. But all those have a sharp in the middle. The opposite of those are where you have flats on the outsides of the chords. This is D flat, E flat, and A flat. So we just did regular D, E, A, and then D flat, E flat, A flat go together. So that's another way you can remember that those are related. B and B flat are brothers, I say, because B has white key, black key, and B flat has black key, white key. And then F sharp's the one all on its own, the only all three black key major chord. And then once I learned my major chords, that was all of them. You can alter any of those chords to make any of the other triad 3-note chords. So if you have a major chord, you just lower the middle note, and that makes a minor chord. So say we have a D flat major chord, which was the one that was black, black, and I want to turn it into minor, you just lower that middle note. And then if you want to turn it into diminished, you take your major chord, you lower the middle note and the top note. That gives you diminished. And then if you ever wanted to play an augmented chord, you play the major chord first, so like E major, that's the one with sharp in the middle, and you raise that top note right there. Of course, I have a lot of lessons on the channel. I'll put a link for you in the description if you really want to get into chords and master them all. The next skill beginners aren't working on is note reading. And you're like, what, Tim? I know all my notes. I know that this is an A, and I know that this is an F, and that this is an E. Well, let me tell you a secret. The same thing with chords. A lot of students will learn about chords first and never approach the subject again. And then over months of playing, they kind of forget about all their chords. Same with note reading. I have so many students, myself included, when I was learning, where I would learn both clefs and then I wouldn't practice them, going through them each time I practice. And then over months, I was like, oh, wait, I'm not really good with my left hand anymore. Or maybe I am good with the notes on the staff, but those ledger lines, those really get me every time. Let me show you how to approach this. So after you initially learn how to read music, what I recommend you do is go to musictheory.net. This is what it's going to look like. You click on exercises at the top. And hey, there's actually a chord identification one from the thing we just talked about, but I want you to select note identification for now. And what I want you to do is up here, there should be a top gear. Good, you can see it. You click on it. And what I want you to do is say you struggle really with the bass clef. You're good with the treble clef. You always find those bass clefs notes to be a hassle, and say you're not even ready for ledger lines yet. So you're going to move the range down here to just notes on the staff. If you did want to practice your ledger lines, which I highly recommend, so you're a little bit more advanced, then that's what you would select. But you can also select, obviously, the treble clef. You can select the grand staff, see how good you are, reading in a more real-world context, both treble and bass clef. And then what I want you to do is I want you to, once you select what you need, go through about 50 of these each practice session. It should take maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and not only be able to play the note, but find it on the piano too. So here's obviously an E, right? And it's going to be right here on the piano. And there you go. It kind of gives you the answer as well. Next thing students don't spend enough time on, reading music. Wait, we just talked about that, right? Well, not quite. This is sight reading. The whole concept of sight reading is being able to look at a piece of music from sight and being able to play it with relatively few mistakes. Ideally, you should be reading through sight reading examples that are a little bit below your current playing level. So looking through these examples here that I have lifted up towards the camera, if your music looks similar to this, you probably want to get a book that's a little bit more simple, maybe quarter notes, half notes. If the music that you're playing is more difficult than these, then you're probably in the right place. Also, another thing I want to point out, before you begin playing each of these, you want to go down a list of certain things you want to be on the lookout for. Time signature, key signature, What types of rhythms they have. Do you have any ties? Do you have any arrests? You want to be taking about a minute's worth of time before you even play an example to kind of analyze it to give yourself the best chance possible. Now, I recommend you practice each exercise twice. Once as a genuine sight read, and then the second time to correct mistakes. Some teachers will say you're not allowed to play it again at all, but I like that second playthrough, man. You can really pick out and correct some of the big mistakes. So how do you get better at sight reading? Sight reading book. Get one. I recommend this one off of Amazon, Improve Your Sight Reading. This is level 3. Again, you want to be kind of looking at the music that you're currently playing, seeing what level it is. So there are 8 levels, I believe, in total. And so, for example, that was book 3, pretty easy sight reading. And as you can see, by the time you get to book 6, there's a lot more black ink on the page. But that's why I really like this, because level 1 is super duper, like, you can't believe how easy it is. And then it gradually works you up to more and more complicated things. That's super important with sight reading. That's something that you're not going to be able to get really with just randomly selecting, sight reading examples here or there. So Improve Your Sight Reading, a book on Amazon. There's also more things I recommend you do. So say like you've gone through that sight reading, or maybe you don't have enough money to buy a sight reading book, but you do have an old like piano lesson book that you haven't really read through before. Maybe there's a lot of pieces you've never seen. Guess what? You can use that as sight reading, because the whole idea is to read through something that you haven't seen a whole lot of times before, and you can use a regular book as well. I also recommend, I don't have one here with me, but like a church hymnal, whether you're religious or not doesn't matter, because the pieces in those are really good with sight reading. They have very common chord patterns, and the chords are split up nicely between the hands, which is actually a lot more practical. You're going to see that in the real music that you play. One of the big things students aren't spending enough time on is music theory. One of those things we kind of already touched on, which was chords, being able to identify those from sight. You also want to learn about chord progressions, which is the progression of chords throughout a piece. The 1-4-5-1 is the most common, so you probably want to learn about that. You also want to be on the lookout for key signatures, which tells you what notes are consistently sharped or flatted throughout the whole song. And if obviously you miss that, then your song isn't going to sound very good. You also want to be on the lookout for like time signature, how many beats per measure, because that's going to kind of dictate the rhythm of the piece. So that's just touching on some of the very basic music theory concepts you should learn. In terms of getting better at music theory, we have this music theory book, Alfred's Essentials of Music Theory. If you were to take a college course on music theory, like Music Theory 101, chances are they're going to give you this book, or they're going to make you buy it for really expensive prices, but you can buy it on Amazon, I forget, maybe like $20, $30. The great thing about this book is it introduces you to concepts. It starts from the very beginning, which is what you want, and then after each little section, they have like a little quiz or a little practice assignment to make sure that you understand everything that you're learning. Speaking of which, I have some courses over on my website, pianolessonsontheweb.com. Use code YouTube for 15% off. I recommend both getting my music theory courses and this. It will make sure that you really have a solid understanding of theory overall. Another big thing beginner students aren't practicing enough is with the metronome. Now, a lot of students are scared with the metronome because to play with the metronome effectively requires a lot of like brain power, including like to listen to the metronome and you're playing at the same time. So what I recommend you do is find pieces that you're already pretty good at if you're not used to the metronome and set it on to a slow tempo. By the way, I should have mentioned, the metronome helps you keep tempo by providing a series of regular clicks and beeps, because the tendency is that we slow down or speed up when we play. A great, besides being able to keep a steady tempo, it's also great at increasing your tempo over time, because say you can play it at this speed pretty good, and then all you do the next time if you play it is you bump it up a little bit in speed, just one notch there, and it's ever so slightly faster. So you're not going from 0 to 60, you're going from 0 to 5 to 10, eventually working your way up to where you need to be. There's another great use for the metronome, and that is to identify problem areas in your music. So if you're playing along with the metronome, everything's going great. You get to that tricky measure and you can't do it. Well, guess what? You need to work out that measure and then try it again and see if you can work it in with the metronome. Okay, so how do you get better at playing with the metronome? Well, let me give you some tips other than practice with it more often. First, I recommend learning the notes of a piece before playing with the metronome, because the notes and everything require mental brain power on its own. And trust me that when you first start playing with the metronome, it's going to be really hard for you to listen to the metronome and your own playing at the same time. The next tip I have for you is start at as slow tempo as you need to go. Now, it is possible to start at too slow of a tempo, but you want to start at something that's comfortable for you. You don't want to start on the fast side. You want to start slower, and then as I mentioned a minute ago, gradually increase your tempo a little bit each time. Once you're able to play through at that tempo with pretty much no mistakes, bump it up. If you are making a lot of mistakes, stay the same or bump it back. We have some great tips here coming at the end, but first I want to say if you found this lesson helpful, make sure to subscribe to get more tips and strategies for everyday people and everyday students like you. Okay, the next thing students should be practicing is memorization, and you should be practicing this whether you have a recital coming up or not. So basically, you're not going to be able to use the music anymore. So why do we memorize our pieces anyway? Well, by memorizing your pieces, which is the notes, you're going to be able to concentrate on what makes the music music. Let me show you some examples. So here we have a bunch of notes, right? And what else are there beyond notes? Well, let me show you. If you have the piece memorized, you can work on getting your phrasing just right, which is dictated by the slur lines. If you don't know about phrasing, make sure to look it up. I think I have some lessons here on the channel, or you want to look up slurs versus playing legato and learn about that. Some other things that you can add in are some dynamics, which is going to make the music sound, more dynamic perhaps. Articulations, which is like how to play the notes long or short. So once again, by memorizing, you can concentrate on those cool little details. So how do you get better at memorizing anyway? Well, first, what I recommend you do is pick your favorite piece, the piece that you're the best at, and begin memorizing it. I actually have a tip for you, though. When you're first memorizing, you can have the music in front of you, because you're going to probably need to look at it a lot, right? If you're just starting to memorize, you're probably going to make a mistake and have to look at it and all that. So I recommend actually keeping it up and practicing through it. And if you do make a mistake, you can glance at it real quick. And then what I want you to do after you've played it a few times is I want you to then try playing it with the music still nearby, but maybe not in quick eye shot. And that will eventually more and more begin to take the training wheels off. I was looking at the wrong camera. Begin to take the training wheels off so that you can branch out and start memorizing. I would memorize, break things down into sections, begin just memorizing like either line 1 or section 1, work on that, get that complete, work on the next section, get that complete, and then the end section. If you try to memorize the whole piece from beginning to end, chances are it's just going to be too much for you to handle all at once. So breaking it down to sections really helps. You could even memorize the right hand part and the left hand part, but I like to memorize them together. The next tip I have for you is to take all the pieces that you have memorized and put them in what's called a repertoire, which is just a list of pieces that you have memorized that you can break out. Somebody ever asks if you want to play or you know how to play, that's something that you can easily grab and be able to play for other people, but also this will help your memory over the time. The more you memorize pieces, hey, the better at it you're going to get. Another thing students aren't practicing is dexterity. What is that? Dexterity is being able to play up and down the piano effectively, right fingers at the right times and the right finger motions, and generally playing the right notes. I missed one there. And how do you get better at dexterity? Well, some simple things. These exercises that everybody's skipping, like scales, which involves playing notes in parallel but with different finger crosses at different times. Arpeggio, same kind of thing, just the notes are a little bit more spread out. So scales, arpeggios is a great way. If you want to learn your scales and arpeggios, by the way, I recommend you check out the Scales and Arpeggios and Cadences book. Oh yeah, learn your cadences too. Hand exercise is another one because it involves playing in parallel like we were with the chords, except it involves playing different space patterns that work out a specific part of your hand. So this first one is going to be working out this bottom part of the hand between each one, but each one will work out a separate, like each pattern will be slightly different, working a different part of the hand. And you can find all your Hanon exercises at hanon-online.com. So we talked about scales and Hanon, which all involved playing notes in parallel. But now what about hand independence, where you're playing different things? Well, I recommend this Carl Czerny School of Velocity because it combines a lot of the topics we talked about today, like chords and scales. You get all the Czerny exercises at pianoexercises.org. Unfortunately, they won't let me link it in the description because I think they do it to prevent bots or something. So just go into Google and type in Czerny exercises, or just go to pianoexercises.org and find them there. There are actually a lot of other things you need to understand about playing piano, particularly like practice strategies and information, so that you can make the best progress possible in the shortest amount of time and eliminate frustration. You need to watch this collection of lessons next. It'll give you everything you need to know. It's the #1 thing you need to do. So your piano teacher, Tim here. Thank you for coming by today, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Bye-bye.
Plan offers 3 other diet programs: the All Plan Diet, Plan Stay As You Are, and Plan Youth Fitness Diet for Teenagers.